Hello, welcome to my presentation on public health during the 18th and 19th centuries. So I'll just get straight into it. Introduction. The purpose of this PowerPoint is to demonstrate and educate the audience on the subject of public health in Britain during the 18th and 19th centuries. This will be covered through an evaluation of urban development and public health in the 18th century, a discussion about the causes and effects of public health during public health problems in the 19th century, and an assessment of the nature and impact of attempts to address public health problems in the 19th century. Furthermore, from viewing the PowerPoint, the audience should be influenced to develop their own viewpoints on these certain aspects of public health at the time. Should they be interested in further developing their understanding and therefore draw out their own conclusions from those ideas. So, an evaluation of the nature of urban development and public health during the 18th century. The nature of urban development and public health during this time were not those of a healthy, progressive nature, as more certain areas became urbanized with higher and more dense population. So did the concern for public health, as the housing that these new residents were living in was not made efficiently enough to maintain good public health. To some extent this is true, as in the latter years of the 18th century Britain had become much more of an industrialised economy than an agricultural economy. This led to overcrowding within urban towns and cities that had not been planned efficiently enough to deal with their rapidly growing populations, by not being able to house these high concentrations of people in healthy living spaces. As before the change in the economy, many people worked in agriculture, lived in spacious cottages in villages, with low populations and with not as much public health concern, in contrast to the new cramped, often back-to-back slum housing. The population of people living in urbanised towns grew from 15% the population of people overall in the country living in urbanised towns grew from 15% in 1750 to 25% by the end of the century. These figures coincided with an increase in concern for public health, as diseases such as smallpox and tuberculosis began to run rampant in urban towns and cities, which had never seen this problem before under these circumstances, and therefore were not prepared with the knowledge to deal with it. Therefore, it could be fair to say that the new urbanised slum housing that lacked planning influenced the rise in public health problems. However, to some extent this may not be entirely true, as not only was insufficient housing causing a spread in disease, but also a lack of knowledge in hygiene. This is during the 18th century people still did not know that washing their hands could stop the spread of infectious diseases, nor did they know to keep cleanliness in mind, as many still bathed in dirty, feces-ridden water that quite often resulted in death due to poor hygiene. Coincide this lack of hygienic knowledge with rising concentrations of the population in urbanised areas, and the cause for concern would inevitably increase, as disease would have lots more people to spread across and thrive within. Therefore, a lack of knowledge in hygienic ways of living may have coincided perfectly with increasing urbanisation to let disease thrive and public health conditions decay. So there's an image there displaying the unhealthy living conditions in 18th century Britain. But in conclusion to this, it would be fair to say that poor housing, as a result of rapidly increasing urbanisation, did create areas for disease to thrive in. However, this was not the only cause, as a lack of knowledge in hygiene also contributed to the downfall in public health. This is as poor housing created tightly packed spaces for infectious diseases to spread through families rapidly. Alongside this, unhygienic living conditions will have further given diseases the means to thrive. Therefore, public health increasingly became a problem in the 18th century as a result of changing industrialised economy that spawned poorly planned urban developments such as slum housing, that coincided with already unhygienic habits to cause numerous deadly health problems among the population of Britain, meaning that the nature of both urban development and public health during this time were those of insufficiency and inadequacy in both preventing and dealing with these problems. And there's an image there that shows Edward Jenner, who was behind the creation or discovery of the vaccine, administering it to someone there. So, a discussion of the causes and effects of public health problems in the 19th century. The rapid increase of population in towns and cities caused there to be an increase in public health problems in the 19th century. This may be true, as this increased level of urbanisation occurred so rapidly that town planners did not have enough time to build healthy and sufficient housing for the new working class people, as many of the newly built houses were back-to-back, cramped, and did not have an efficient sewage system. Furthermore, this level of rapid urbanisation had not been seen before, meaning that town planners did not have the knowledge of how these housing circumstances could affect public health in such a high concentration of people. The effects of these issues were that diseases like cholera, typhus, and smallpox began to spread thoroughly in urban areas, with an estimated 33% of deaths in Britain during the mid-19th century being due to infectious diseases. Therefore, essentially a lack of knowledge to do with urbanisation, which led to poor planning, may have been the cause of an increase in public health problems such as the spread of disease. However, these reasons may not be the only causes of public health problems during this era, as smog also caused death and illness during this time. Smog was the mixture of fog and pollutants such as industrial waste products and smoke from home coal fires. The dangers of smog were publicised in 1880 by Francis Albert Rollo Russell, who published a leaflet suggesting that the sulphur in the smoke released caused bronchitis and other respiratory diseases as a result of the smoke released from factories and coal being burnt under home chimneys. Furthermore, he found that 2,000 Londoners had died due to the smog, as well as others having their pre-existing lung conditions being worsened. Therefore, it may also be true that smog was a cause of public health problems during this time, as the effect it gave was the deaths of thousands of people, as it caused diseases like bronchitis and breathing problems. In conclusion to this, rapid urbanisation combined with poor planning as well as the presence of smog were in fact all causes of public health problems during the 19th century. This is as the government had never seen such a rise in urban populated areas before and did not know how to efficiently house such high concentrations of people. This led to insufficiencies within the housing that then gave disease such a great place to thrive within. This cannot be contested as a cause of public health problems, as the physical deterioration of these areas into slums became so visibly clear. However, it is true that this was not the only cause of public health problems, as smog too became a product of this industrial era. As it came about as a result of fuel usage in factories and homes, and destructively what further caused disease to spread and the health of the population to worsen. Therefore, it can be concluded that it is true that all of the aforementioned factors all came together to cause and have a detrimental effect on public health. So there's an image there in the corner displaying the black smoke released from factories in Leeds that later turned into smog. So, moving on. An assessment of the nature and impact of attempts to address public health problems in the 19th century. To some extent, the Chadwick Report of 1842 had a significant impact in dealing with some of the public health problems at the time. This is as from surveying numerous areas of the country. Chadwick pointed out and made links between a lack of sanitation and the spread of disease, high mortality rates, and low life expectancy. It was not uncommon around this time for working men to die in their 40s. The impact of this report was that the government responded to it 6 years later by introducing the Public Health Act 1848. The Act focused on improving water supply, sewage drainage, and environmental health regulation, and was therefore seen as an improvement in public health and a clear real effort by the government to improve it as such. However, Chadwick himself was instructed to carry out this report on behalf of the government and not of his own free will, or not of his own goodwill, and consequently his call for government action of public health was more of an economic-based one than of a caring humanitarian one, as he believed that the low life expectancy of the working population negatively impacted revenues for the government. The impact of these motivations for change could have therefore meant that the government only intended to improve public health to a standard which benefited their economic interests and not the ultimate standard of common healthy living. So there's a little table there just showing the low life expectancy of people in Britain at the time. It's commonly in their 30s, 40s. So in conclusion to this statement, I agree that the Chadwick Report 1842 did have a significant impact in improving public health conditions, as it consequently led to the government taking action in introducing the Public Health Act 1848, which actively helped to improve the sanitation of the public through more regulations. However, I also believe that the significance of its impact was limited, as the motivations behind the report and the later call for change will have an economic basis and not a humanitarian basis. This will have meant that the government's actions in making changes were based on sufficiently supporting their economic interests by improving public health to a limited standard, and therefore their intentions were not to sufficiently and solely support the health of the public as a whole, meaning that the government could have possibly done even more to improve public health at this time. Therefore, the Chadwick Report 1842 had a significant but limited impact on improving public health, along with its consequential change being the Public Health Act 1848, which was also significant but limited effort due to the more financial motivations behind it. So another attempt to address public health problems in the 19th century. Another attempt to improve public health at this time was the introduction of the Sanitary Act 1866, which was to a large extent especially impactful in dealing with public health problems. This is as the Act made local authorities improve conditions and remove nuisances, such as health hazards like dumped waste. The local authorities also became responsible for providing sewers, water and street cleaning. The Act enforced all houses to be connected to a new main sewer. It limited the use of cellars as living rooms. As well as this, it established a definition of overcrowding. Furthermore, every town had to appoint sanitary inspectors to oversee everything was held to the required standard. The impact of all these changes under the new Act was that public health generally improved as a result of these more sanitary ways of living being established, which created living spaces that were not so welcoming for disease to enter and spread within. However, the introduction of this Act and the changes it brought did not solve all of this era's public health problems, and many of the houses that people lived in were still dilapidated and considered to be slum housing. In conclusion, the Sanitary Act 1866 was indeed very successful and impactful in improving public health. This is as although it did not do much to improve the conditions of such problem of slum housing, as this was not its intended area to change, it did however bring great changes and effectively help to improve many sanitary factors of living such as sewage, water supply and the overall cleanliness of the streets. Therefore, it can be concluded that the Sanitary Act 1866 was impactful in dealing with certain areas of public health problems of the time. So, a summary of my presentation. In summary, this presentation should have informed and educated the audience on the topic of public health during the 18th and 19th centuries in Britain, through including an evaluation of the nature of urban development and public health during the 18th century, which talks about how increasing urbanisation linked to increasing public health problems. As well as this, the presentation has included a discussion of the causes and effects of public health problems in the 19th century, with one such cause and effect being smog and respiratory problems. Furthermore, an assessment of the nature and impact of attempts to address public health problems in the 19th century. It is also covered with newly introduced lawful acts being mentioned. Therefore, from consuming the teachings of this presentation, you should be able to walk away with more knowledge of this topic and era and before, and perhaps with the interest to continue studying in this area. So here's a references list of everything that was cited within the presentation. Should be able to see that. And there's bibliography. And that is it. Thank you for listening. Thank you very much.